4.
Good afternoon. We'll now call the meeting of the Waco City Council November 17th, 2020 to order at 3 p.m. Joining me online today are Mayor Pro Tem Andrea Bearfield, Councilmember Hector Savito, Councilmember John Kennard, Councilmember Darius Ewing, and Councilmember Jim Holmes. Please join us now for a moment of silence. Thank you. On March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state of disaster declaration expires. In accordance with physical distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, this meeting will not be open to the public. This meeting is being broadcast live at WCCC.tv. The audio is also being recorded. The video and audio recordings will be available to the public. According to the governor and attorney general, statutes that may require face-to-face interaction between members of the public and public officials are suspended, provided, however, that the governmental body must offer alternative methods of communication with their public officials. This includes public comment on agenda items. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to submit their written comments on a listed agenda item were asked to submit their comments to the city secretary's office by 11 a.m. today. The city secretary will read into the record the comments submitted for items on the agenda at the appropriate time. Individuals who registered to speak on a public hearing item will be allowed to speak remotely for 3 minutes. We will now recess the regular session, convene to work session with a report from the city manager. Bradley Ford.
Thanks, Mayor. Good afternoon, council members. We don't have any changes to the agenda today, and I actually don't have any employee recognitions or organizational updates either. So we'll move pretty quickly here into the Halsey report. Hopefully he made it downstairs in time.
He's on mute.
Larry, you're muted.
Julie, if you'll unshare yours, let me share mine. There you go. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No. Okay, let's go back over here. I've got this right here we got to do now. Now we're going to be it. Now you see it, right?
Yes, we do.
All right. Sorry about that. We're a little bit of start off, and let me get you full screen here. All right, here we go. Wednesday, November the 11th was Veterans Day. At this year's city offices and facilities were all closed, allowing city staff to have a new day off and observe the holiday. Throughout the week, videos of some of the 125 city employees who are veterans were posted to our social media pages and aired on WCCC.tv. Although what would have been the 97th annual Veterans Day parade didn't happen, the Waco City Cable Channel replayed the 2019 parade at the traditional time of 11 a.m. Each half of hour for the rest of the day, citizens could watch 18 different documentary interviews the city had produced through the years of veterans, mostly World War II, telling their heart-wrenching stories and accounts of their time in service to our country. The Aardvark COVID-19 van has been kept busy as it has moved around the community. So far, it's been deployed to 7 different locations around the county, including businesses, churches, and school districts, with a total of 1,122 of the easy saliva tests having been given from the mobile van. The surge testing will continue at least through November, and the dates and times can be found on the COVIDwaco.com website. On November the 9th, the concrete was poured for the new fire administration building at the corner of 25th and Grimm, the site of the former 25th Street Theater. The walls of the building will be going up soon, which will be including a community meeting room just inside the entrance that replicates the old theater. Once the administration building is complete, the contractor will begin construction of the new station number 6 located adjacent to the administration building. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas around Heritage Square with Santa's house and giant tree ready to be lit. Production is underway for this year's virtual A December to Remember Waco Wonderland that will include a virtual tree lighting ceremony, a fireworks show, a downtown holiday light tour, and a visit with Santa and his live reindeer, plus sounds of the season performances and much more. The big virtual celebration will be on Friday night, December the 4th, starting at 7 p.m. So we invite families to plan to gather around their televisions or computers with their hot chocolate or holiday drink and help kick off the 2020 holidays in downtown Waco. The previously announced closure of University Parks Drive from Clay to Franklin Avenue is now in effect. Traffic coming from Baylor on I-35 or I-35 on University Parks Drive will follow the detour signs and take Clay to either 2nd or 4th Streets and on to Jackson and Franklin. Traffic leaving the downtown area is recommended to take the 5th Street to Clay and back onto University Parks Drive. Solid Waste Services gave Waco residents the opportunity to properly dispose of scrap tires for free on November the 14th. 1,591 tires were collected and kept out of the landfill during last Saturday's Scrap Tire Day. The Cameron Park Zoo has received a new baby cougar that was rescued by the Central Valley Animal Rescue in Washington, D.C., and transported to our zoo to further her rehabilitation and eventually become a companion for Tawakoni, the zoo's only mountain lion. Zoo staff held a naming contest that allowed people to vote on a name for $5 per vote, with the proceeds going towards the new mountain lion's medical care and will be split between the Center Valley Animal Rescue Center in Washington and the Cameron Park Zoological Botanical Society. Animal Medical Fund that will receive the funds purchases supplies and equipment for the zoo veterinary hospital. The names that were chosen is Dakota, meaning friend of all. The total raised was $600. And now my final slide, and coming up November the 21st, is City Council District 3 cleanup. And that completes my report.
Thank you, Larry, for another great report, as always. Really great to see all the great stuff that's going on, especially appreciative of all the work that's going on around the free surge COVID testing that is continuing. We are hitting record high numbers each day with new testing, and that's really important. I appreciate all the people that have come out to get tests, and encourage everyone to continue to do that. And also all the hard work that's gone into the virtual holiday celebration. That's a great thing for our city to offer to our citizens at a time when we just can't do it the normal way. So appreciate all that good work.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor and Council, we do have one informal report on the agenda today. It's IR 2020-796, which is an update on the proposed municipal settings designation, MSD for short, for TIF zones 1, 2, and 3, plus some additional properties adjacent to the Elm Avenue corridor. Staff has been working since January 2020 with Smith Inland to make an application to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for a district-wide MSD. The aim in that project is to remove unnecessary development hurdles related to environmental regulations of groundwater. These hurdles can often require individual property owners to work through a costly 9 to 12 month approval process on a parcel by parcel basis in order to redevelop properties. Staff's prepared this IR to serve as an update to the public and to the council in advance of anticipated actions on your agendas in December, with an eye towards adoption of the MSD in the spring of 2021. Today on the agenda, we do have 10 public hearings for you. Clint Peters, our Director of Development Services, will be reviewing those in the work session. We have 27 resolutions on the agenda today. I'm going to highlight 2 of those, the first of which is Resolution 2020-816, which rescinds Resolution 2019-968 and seeks to approve a Chapter 380 grant agreement with SRH for an amount equal to 70% of the municipal hotel occupancy tax generated and paid by the Marriott AC Hotel in an amount not to exceed $5.5 million over a 10-year term in exchange for the capital investment of $47.8 million and their creation and retention of 40 full-time jobs. This project has an accompanying TIF ordinance on the agenda today for second reading. This project ultimately will create 182 high-quality hotel rooms with full-service amenities, along with an executive conference center. The developer's substantial investment alongside the TIF and Chapter 380 agreements really enable a number of positive community benefits, including the activation of Mary Avenue and 6th Street with street-level retail, in accordance with the Imagine Waco plan. Additionally, the developer is committed to constructing a shared parking garage with 332 spaces, of which 145 are publicly available. That garage will be located in one of our highest parking need areas of downtown. By working with the developer on this garage, the public spaces are being constructed at a significant savings when compared to if the city or TIF was to go out and build a structured parking garage in that area. The developer is also committed to adding environmental and sustainability elements into this project, including at least 6 publicly accessible electric vehicle charging stations and solar on the rooftop of the hotel structure. In terms of the jobs being generated that I mentioned earlier, the developer has committed to hiring at least 70% of the full-time jobs from the City of Waco residents and at least 30% of the jobs from residents of the city core. If the developer were to not hit those targets, the percentage of hotel occupancy rebate would decrease based on language provided in the contract. And finally, the developer's been certainly working with our Convention and Visitors Bureau group to provide room blocks in the contract for large Priority 1 citywide conventions, which should help us generate additional business at our own Waco Convention Center. I do want to recognize a couple things here. One is submitted for the council's consideration, and I want to highlight the work of both City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie, as well as our Economic Development Project Manager, Kent George, who've spent considerable time bringing these matters to the council.
With this amendment, so the original agreement was for a 55% rebate, and now this is being amended to 70%. Contemplating kind of a full sort of payout, what is the difference between what was originally approved to and what we would be giving out based on this revised number?
So the maximum rebate would go to $5.5 million in revenue to SRH. The city would still receive an estimated $2 million in hotel occupancy tax revenues. And additionally, the city or the Tourism Public Improvement District, the TPID, would receive an additional $2 million. So the split over those 10 years would effectively be 5.5 in revenue to SRH, 2 to the City of Waco, and 2 to the TPID.
But under the original agreement, was the original maximum, what, $4.5 million? It was somewhere around there, right? So just basically we're approving pretty much about $1 million extra to them over the life of the agreement. And again, like I am very much in favor of this project. I'm supportive of all the TIF amendments we're making for them. I was supportive of the original agreement at 55%. However, I have said in the past, and I hold to it, that I personally feel like any additional hospitality funding I was fine where we were, but I wasn't interested in giving any additional funds for any hospitality project or short-term lodging. And I'm going to hold to that on this one. But I say that just to be being consistent from what my feelings have been throughout all of this. But that for this project, I am incredibly in favor of the project and all the work they're doing, the partnership on the parking, the work they'll be doing with the CVB and the convention center and providing that conference space. I think it's great for us. I'm very excited to have them here. I'm supportive of everything we're doing on the TIF side and everything we did originally with this agreement. But just this amendment, I'm not in favor of giving any extra money over and above that.
A question. So with the additions that they're making with the electric charging stations, with the solar, with the shared parking, do we have a fiscal number for that?
Esmeralda, would you promote Kent George to a panelist and allow him to engage in this conversation?
Yes, we will.
Councilmember, I know we had a number of cost increases associated with all their commitments, as well as the developer has been working towards this project for about 8 months now. And as you might imagine, they've had cost increases over that time.
Sure.
Kent, to the question of how much environmentally sustainability elements are costing the developer. Do you have a sense of that?
No, at this time, we do not have a sense of what the total will be for extra solar and the 6 big with the charge stations. But, you know, the increase of ask was based on the increased cost of the construction. COVID had an effect on supply chains, and construction costs have increased since they originally went through. So that's kind of the cusp of why we're seeing the increased cost and request.
Yeah, no. I'm not questioning the increase in cost, because I understand what the nature of the season has required. I just wanted to see if there was some, you know, quantitative balance in what we're getting as opposed to what we're giving, you know, some net neutrality in there.
Certainly follow up with a detailed response to you, council member. All right, the second resolution I'd like to highlight today is Resolution 2020-838, which approves a contract with CDM Smith for engineering services for the W. Mars Bullhide Wastewater Treatment Plant Capacity Improvement Project in an amount not to exceed $688,240. This engineering study builds upon our more than $21 million investment in the Highway 84 corridor for the conveyance of increased wastewater flows. This study, assuming the necessary permits, regulatory entities are provided, contemplates an increased bullhide capacity from an existing 1.5 million gallons per day moving to 2.25 million gallons per day. An increased capacity would represent an opportunity to further delay construction of a new wastewater treatment plant in that area, and also represent significant cost savings, potentially as much as $7 million when compared with constructing a new facility. I wanted to highlight this item to really appreciate our utility staff and the initiative they're showing in this, as well as highlight the council's continued efforts to support quality infrastructure within our growth corridors. Today on the agenda, we have 4 ordinances for your review. Ordinance 2020-839 is a first reading ordinance that amends Section 18-76 of the Code of Ordinances to create a fire training lieutenant classified position in the fire administration class, and establishes the authorized strength for that position at 1, and decreases the number of fire alarm operator classified positions in the telecommunication class by the same. Ordinance 2020-840 is a first reading ordinance amending Section 1883 of the Code of Ordinances to increase the number of Grade 1 police officer positions from 210 to 215, and increase the Waco Police Department's total authorized strength to 266. This ordinance lays the groundwork for the upcoming community policing program that we anticipate rolling out in fiscal year 2021. The remaining 2 ordinances are on for second reading. And if there's no further questions, that concludes my report.
And Mayor and Council, I'd like to go back and just mention that for IR 2020-796, that the Mayor, Councilmember Kennard, Councilmember Ewings, and Holmes have all filed affidavits of substantial interest on that item, which are on the record. And that we have received public comment cards for Resolution 2020-814 and 2020-816. So Mayor, those might have to be pulled from the consent agenda.
Okay, we also have filed affidavits of substantial interest on ordinance 2020-842 as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have received comments on resolutions 2020-814 and 2020-816, so they will be pulled from the consent agenda, voted on separately. Are there any other items council would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda will include resolutions 2020-812 through 2020-838, with the exception of resolution 2020-814 and 2020-816. And I will turn it back to Bradley now to introduce the next work session presentation.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to invite Clint Peters, our Director of Development Services, to go over the planning public hearing agenda items.
We are promoting Clint to panelist, and then he'll share his screen.
Clint, are you on mute?
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. We do have 10 public hearings. First one is dealing with our subdivision plats. We have 4 subdivision plats. The first being the Maple Sunset Edition, lots 1 through 3, block 1. This is a replat of a single family lot at the intersection of Ritchie Road and Warren Road in West Waco. They are splitting it into 3 lots, about 1/4 of an acre each. They'll have a shared access point because it is on a major street, Ritchie Road. And due to the replat, there is a water line extension required. They have provided all the required documents, and Plan Commission did recommend approval of this plat. The next plat is another replat. This is Campbell Edition, lots 5 and 6, block 1. This is an industrial lot at the intersection of Mars and Texas Central Parkway in our Texas Central Industrial Park. This is a 20-acre lot that they're splitting into a 15-acre and a 5.5-acre tract. It does require a sewer extension on this one to serve the new lot that's being created. The next plat is a preliminary plat for the Oak Bluffs Edition. This is a single-family residential subdivision in our ETJ out in the Chalk Bluff area along Golson Road. This is a 13.5-acre tract, proposed 20 lots. These are, as you'll see, these lots are below the 1 acre minimum lot size that the council approved a revision to our subdivision ordinance, raising that lot size minimum from a 1/2 acre to 1 acre size. But this plat was already in process, so we're treating it under the old rule, so it can have the 1/2 acre lots. There are proposed 20 lots again on 14 acres. There were some drainage requirements and access requirements, and then they had to prove that they could use the subsurface septic tanks for the 1/2 acre lots. And all those requirements have been met, and Plan Commission recommended approval of this one too. And then our last plat is the preliminary plat of the Northgate Edition. This is a large 211-acre tract of land at the intersection of Lakeshore and 19th Street. They are proposing to subdivide this into 2 lots. One being 101-acre lot for the proposed Bosque River Resort. If council remembers, this was a special permit that was approved last year for a 350 RV park development. They are proposing to extend College Street from the intersection of Lakeshore. There's already a signal there, so it would become a 4-way intersection and build a road into the development that will provide access to the lot 1 where the RV park is, and then future development will extend that roadway all the way back over the 19th. The remainder lot is about 110 acres, and that will be divided further in the future. They're really concentrating on getting the resort lot platted and under construction first. And all comments have been met on that, and all 4 of the plats are recommended for approval by the Plan Commission. Our next 3 public hearings are dealing with voluntary annexations. I'll go through each one individually. The first one, 803, is a request from WBW Development for the annexation of about 66 acres along Ritchie Road. This is the Park Meadow South Phase 1 addition, which is a residential subdivision that they are requesting annexation for. Also, this would rezone it or zone it to single-family R1B zoning and provide an urban residential land use designation, as well as a service plan for the site. There's also about 4 acres of the Ritchie Road right-of-way that will be annexed as well, along with this phase of the subdivision. That right-of-way was part of the Ritchie Road expansion that needs to be brought into the city as well. We did mail out notices on this one. We did get one card that had concerns about police services in the area, but no other responses were received. And Plan Commission did recommend approval of this annexation. The next two voluntary annexation requests are from Waco Industrial Foundation. The first being 2 tracts of land equaling 71 acres out in the Aviation Industrial Park near TSTC. You can see the 2 tracts there. This would be, those are the 2 remaining tracts that WIF owns that is outside our city limits. So this would bring all their property within our city limits for future planning as these develop, they'll already be in the city limits. And then the other one are 3 tracts out in the Texas Central Industrial Park. These are 160 acres worth of land along Wycon Drive and Alliance Parkway. Similar situation. These are the 3 remaining tracts that WIF owns that are currently outside the city limits. Both these annexations will be M2 zoning and general industrial land use designation, and we had no opposition on either one of these. And Plan Commission recommended approval of the annexation, zoning, and land use designation.
Hey, Clint, can you go back to the previous slide real quick, please? What would be the total acreage of area 1, 2, and 3 together in this area?
It is 159 acres.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Our next public hearing, 806, is a special permit request from Gary Mayfield for a short-term rental type 2 at 3105 Trace Avenue. This is a single-family residence in our Dean Highland neighborhood. You can see the Highland Baptist Church here, a block over. It is R1B zoning, and you can see here there are some other approved STRs in the area, but they're outside of the 500-foot buffer that's required by our ordinance. We did get one card in opposition, and the out of 27 notices, and which is the property that's next door to this, but no other cards or anybody speaking at the Plan Commission hearing. The operator does live in the neighborhood and will be available anytime it's been rented out. This is a 2-bedroom home, and the Plan Commission did recommend approval of it based on the findings and conditions for a special permit. The next special permit is at 4900 Franklin Avenue. This is a special permit for to allow sales, rental, parts, repair, and storage for auto and RVs and M2 zoning. This is a property on Franklin Avenue, just behind the Academy Sporting Goods store. This the former home of the Waco Wholesale Trailers operation. The Waco Motorsports, which has their facility down Franklin Avenue, is wanting to move over to this location from their current operation and use this site. They are going to be building 2 new canopies for display of their inventory. You can see 2 here, and then the rest of the site is already existing. No opposition on this one, and Plan Commission recommend approval of it. The next special permit request is for property located at 1518 Austin Avenue. Kristen and Michelle Hill for a special permit for a flea market and C4 zoning. This is located just east of the 16th Street and Austin Avenue, Zone C4. It's the Sparrow Home Furnishing Shop. There is a parking lot that's directly behind the building that they would like to have a weekly market on Saturdays from 10 to 4 that would have outside vendors, which does require the special permit for the flea market. We did have some opposition on this one, concerned about it being open all week and potentially looking bad from the road. So we did put some conditions on this just to make sure that there aren't any issues with it operationally. The conditions are that it's just be for a 1-year permit, and then that the market can only be held on Saturdays, and that all the tents and equipment that are associated with market have to be broken down each week. Plan Commission did recommend approval of this one. It was by a vote of 9-2.
Hey, Clint, had they originally contemplated having it open every day, or were they just going to use it on the weekend anyways?
Their request was just for the weekend, just for Saturday.
Okay, so we're not putting any additional. I mean, they're agreeing to that, but that's
correct. Yeah, we worked with them, and they're okay with those conditions.
Okay, thanks.
The next special permit 809 is an amendment to a special permit to transfer a special permit from one entity to another. It's currently in WAEC LLC, and it's being sold to VVC of Texas LLC. This is the Waco Animal Emergency Clinic at the corner of I-35 and Columbia Avenue in South Waco. Commercial zoning. The building is there. It's been in operation for over a decade. They're not making any changes to it. This is just a transfer the permit to the new ownership. No opposition on this one, and Plan Commission recommended approval of it. The next special permit is a short-term rental type 2 at 805 East Clay Avenue. This is a single-family home that's been recently renovated in the Northeast Riverside Neighborhood Association between Orchard Lane and I-35 in East Waco. Currently zoned R1B zoning. You can see there is another one that was permitted in the vicinity on Spring Street here. Here's the home. It's a 2-bedroom home, has adequate parking for 2 cars. No opposition on this one, and Plan Commission recommended approval of it. And then the last one is a short-term rental type 1, which is the owner is on site and living there when the guests are there. This property is at 5500 Birdie Circle out in the China Spring area near Lake Waco Golf Course. They have a guest home in the backyard that they'd like to rent out, about 600 square feet. R1B zoning. See the home here. And Plan Commission did recommend approval of this. We did get one email in opposition of it. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Clint. Are there any questions or comments on any of those items?
Yes, I did have a couple of comments. Just going forward to keep it on the radar for staff, just making sure that we are looking at best practices for Waco specifically in regards to our permitting process and the notification process for that. I know in a lot of conversations I've had, those notices go to the property owners, and a lot of those places, and specifically in our city core, there's a lot of renters and a lot of long-time renters that do still add value to the neighborhood, but they don't necessarily get those notices or get a chance to have a voice and speak into or oppose what's going on. And so I think there's a lot of different ways you can get creative about it, whether it's a permit is applied for and you have to make sure there's a neighborhood association meeting in between then and when it comes to Plan Commission or something of the like. But really, I'm just saying this to make that known and to make sure it stays on the radar. I'd love to have that be something that is not necessarily kicked down the road, but is approached soon when we look at the process for our permitting.
I also wanted to take a moment to ask Clint if we have, or are we considering doing some sort of plan maybe regarding our short-term rentals. I don't know if other cities have done studies or plans to indicate, not that there's a cap or anything, but do we have a plan? I mean, or, because I have seen cities that have neighborhoods that have get overrun with short STRs, and I'm just not sure where we are in that process. I understand with the influx of tourism and the limited amount of lodging that we had in the past, not necessarily so with the boom of hotels that is online currently, but I don't want anyone to eat the other. So I was wondering if we had a plan in place for that.
Well, I would say, cities treat STRs all kind of different ways. There's some that just look at prohibiting all of them, and then there's some, that just allow them by right. Ours is kind of a combo of the two, where we do allow them, but we do, try to protect residential areas and have, a public process. People can voice their opinions. I would say the ordinance is almost 5 years old. So if that would be a good jumping off point to, take another look at it and see, if it's doing what we intended for it to do, or if there's some things that need to be tweaked. So that's something that we can look at.
I think that'd be a good idea. And to piggyback on Councilmember Ewing, and we've noticed this in property issues in District 1, if the landowner gets a message and not necessarily the renter or the resident, are notices placed, is there one sent to the owner, one also sent to the address on file, which would be the resident? Are they sent both ways or just to the owner?
Currently, they're just sent to the owner of the property.
But so it's possible that in the future, when we do things like that, we could send one to the owner and then one to the resident.
That is something we could look at doing, yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Councilmember Bearfield and Ewing, we'll certainly add those as future agenda items for bringing back towards the council at a meeting to be determined shortly. I think those are great points.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I'll agree with that. I mean, I've pushed for us to relook at those for a while now. So we're the only city that I know of that has to approve every single one. So I think it's worth revisiting and considering, and hope, streamlining if possible, because it's the way it is right now. It's ponderous for both staff and us.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Clint? Clint, thank you to you and your staff for all the great work you do in this area. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor and Council, I'll give a moment to call our next work session, 2020-798, which is a discussion of a report on collections of delinquent accounts. This presentation will be joined by Robert Myers and Rick Bostic, who work on behalf of the City of Waco to collect delinquent taxes and accounts. Each of these gentlemen have worked to provide a very thorough report in advance of this discussion that we've included in your City Council packet today. And this afternoon, they'll be providing a presentation summarizing the key results of each of their firm's efforts. Rick and Robert, are you there?
I am here.
I am here, Mr. Ford, members of the council.
All right, welcome. We'll invite you to share your presentation or open with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Deaver, members of the council. I'm Robert Myers. I'm an attorney with the McCurry Law Firm, and this is our annual report on our collection activities for the City of Waco. Our services include collection of property taxes as well as fines and fees through the City of Waco through the municipal court and other delinquent accounts as they occur. And there's a short PowerPoint presentation we have. It gives you some of our results of some of our collection activities, primarily in the area of property taxes, and then finishing with some of the other accounts that we've worked on for the City of Waco. The first chart that we have here, if we could get someone to go to our first chart. Thank you so much. This first chart is a chart that reviews over the last 5 years the city's annual current tax collections. These 5 bars reflect the actual percentage of taxes that the city's collected from its annual current tax levy. And as you can tell, the city collects a high percentage of its taxes, usually annually. Last year, the collections were at 98.57%. This year, and it surprises us very much in our collection business practice, that despite the troubles that our nation, our communities, our members of our business community and our taxpayers are having, the current tax collection percentage increased from 98.57% in 2018 to 98.78%. And these are the taxes that are collected from October 1, 2019 through September 30th of 2020. And despite the fact, as I said, we're having a series of difficulties in our community and our lives, the taxpayers, the city of Waco responded very powerfully and paid their taxes to the city on a timely basis. And I think that's a very promising thought for the city is in terms of the economic vitality of the city, even in terms of the economic circumstances and the difficulties we're all having. The next chart we have for you is a similar chart in the sense it compares not just the actual taxes for that particular year that are collected, but the additional taxes and penalties and interest that are also collected for the same period of time from October 1 through September 30th, your fiscal year. And typically when you add in your current year taxes, your delinquent taxes, and your penalties and interest, the city's collections actually exceed the actual levy. The green bar on the right is the actual levy for the city, the actual amount of taxes. The green bar is the actual taxes that are collected. The blue bar is the actual amount of taxes levied by the city for that particular tax year. And as you can see, normally the green bar edges above the blue bar. That's because we collect more property tax revenue, current taxes, delinquent taxes, penalties and interest than the actual current levy for each year. Now, 2019, this past year, despite the fact that the city had a high percentage of collection of its current taxes, the actual total collections, including penalties and interest and delinquent taxes, is less than 100%. And the reason for that is not because the city's tax collections decreased or delinquent tax collections decreased or penalties and interest were not collected. In fact, they were collected. And if they were all reflected in here, you would have collected over 100%. However, in the past year, the McLennan County Appraisal District has been resolving a backlog of property owner appeals of their property values going back a number of years. And the resolution of those lawsuits by the appraisal district has resulted in property owners receiving refunds of taxes that is paid in prior years. And so the tax office that does the tax collections for the city and prepares these collection reports actually has offset your property tax collections by the refunds that the city had to make based on the litigation being wrapped up by the McLennan County Appraisal District. Somewhere in the neighborhood of over $700,000 in refunds were in the past 12 months made by the city of Waco to resolve these backlog of property owner appeals. If you had added those numbers in to your collections, you would have clearly cleared more than 100% of your tax levy for this year, and it would have been in line with your current tax collection percentage, which would have been a very good number for the city. So you did collect the money, it's just that it went out to refunds, which would normally be reflected on this chart. And we think those lawsuits, the backlog of lawsuits are being worked through. Hopefully there will be less in this current year, and you'll return to 100% collections next year in 2020. And the next chart we have, this chart simply just shows what's left over for these past 5 years. And actually, for these past 5 years, what percentage totally of the taxes have been collected. And as you can see, for 2019, we're at 98.78%, but typically over 99%, a very high percentage of the city's taxes are collected. For the 2018 to date, from October 1 of 18 to September 30th of 2020, 99.47% of the city's taxes have been collected. You can see for 2017, 99.67%, and 2016, 99.73%, 2015, 99.76%. Very high percentage of the city's taxes are collected. And property taxes has always proven to be a very stable form of public revenue, because even in light of economic circumstances that we're now experiencing and we've experienced in the past, property taxes hold up their collection and providing a revenue for needed public services. And this chart reflects a lot of what that shows. So I think the city has had a good year in its collections. It's just that the one chart where you didn't have 100%, which you normally have in prior years, was not indicative of it, simply because of other circumstances outside the city's control. And I think Mr. Boswick was going to review with you the next chart that we have up.
Yes, this is, if you will, a pie chart, obviously, that gives you some idea of the collection status of the delinquent taxes. In 2019, actually, within, as I'm sure all of you know, the delinquent taxes are turned over to us on July 1. Within 3 months of that date, for the 2019 delinquent taxes, 44.60% of that amount was collected. And logically, the longer we have an opportunity to collect those taxes, the greater percentage that is collected. And you can see that in the 2018 delinquent taxes, where after 15 months, over 75% are collected. And in 2017, over 82% are collected. And if we can go, and let me, just for a quick moment, mention to you that both of our firms understand and very much take to heart in the process of the collection of these delinquent taxes is the fact that the taxes are being collected from citizens and neighbors of ours. And constituents of yours. And that process needs to be thoughtful, dignified, and appropriate. The goal is to collect as high a percentage of the taxes as we can on the city's behalf, but that's got to be, and we've shared with y'all in the past, that's got to be balanced by an approach that is appropriate and dignified and reasonable as it relates to our citizens and our neighbors. And we really work hard to do it in that way and take it very seriously. And the process, just kind of on a step-by-step basis, is the first step is that we send out letters, notices of the delinquent taxes. So, I mean, it's all of us who are busy can neglect something unintentionally, and this gives a taxpayer, or there may be a temporary circumstance, and this gives a taxpayer an opportunity to immediately respond without any further issue. After that, we send out a further notice that it's delinquent, and then another notice that really, it's a 3-notice process. We want to give our neighbors, our constituents, our citizens every opportunity to deal with this on a informal basis as possible. After that, and frankly, this is a very small percentage, but there were 204 suits actually filed on the city's behalf for the collection of taxes last year, and 70 judgments collected. And that ultimately ultimately is the process, and obviously we deal at the far end with sometimes with bankruptcies as well as abandoned properties. But that is the process, and we feel like and want to emphasize that this is a gradual process and one that recognizes the dignity of the people that we're dealing with.
And I might add, this past year with the circumstances and the pandemic we were dealing with, in April, we changed what would normally have been a delinquent notice to a reminder notice, just to let our property owners who had not been able to pay their taxes timely know that the tax office, although it was actually physically closed to the public, it was still processing payments. It could still be reached by making payments through the mail, through a drop box, or through electronic means. And if anybody wanted to talk to anybody about their tax delinquency, our offices were still staffed and we were available to reach out to those people and talk to them. And so we sent out a series of what we're really entitled reminder notices, just to remind people that these taxes were there and that the opportunity to pay the taxes or work through their problems, we were still listening to them and still willing and still able and still at our offices to discuss that with. I might also point out that our next slide just indicates the other collection activities that we undertake for the city. We also assist the city in our property tax collections through focusing on lots that have large amounts of municipal liens that have been imposed for demolition or weed control. In that regard, we've filed suits and assisted the city on those properties that really need to have repurposed through a tax foreclosure process. We assisted the City of Waco Library in tax collections. And finally, our last slide lists the activities that we undertook for the municipal court. They referred to us over 4,500 cases, over $2.2 million, and we assisted them with quite a number of those cases and resolved over $800,000 in collection of their outstanding delinquent fines and fees, and helped them resolve over $400,000 worth of those. And in addition, as Rick mentioned, we, as attorneys, we do file claims for bankruptcy cases in which the city is owed money. So our collection act, we serve as a one-stop shop for the city of Waco and the city staff. If they have a collection problem in any of these areas, they've got one person, one firm, one set of firms to call, and that's us, and we'll take care of it for them. And we very much appreciate the opportunity of doing that, and for the city of Waco and its citizens. And that's our report for the year. And I want to just make one comment, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Kennard. I know that you'll be leaving the council, and very much appreciate you giving us the opportunity these last few years at your very busy council meetings to let us go through our report and let you know what we've been up to.
And
on your behalf.
And Robert, also Councilperson Ewing as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Councilperson Ewing. Yes. Well, Councilperson Ewing hasn't had to put up with us as many times as the mayor and Councilman Kennard.
This is what I'm going to miss the most, let me tell you. I appreciate all the work y'all do for us, and particularly the thoughtful consideration you give to our citizens, always, but particularly in this trying time. We know you are very considerate of that and do your best to accommodate and to just understand. And so we do appreciate all that you do for the city, and particularly that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree with what John just said. You all have always demonstrated that responsible approach to this, compassionate approach where you can, and we really do appreciate that, especially right now. But also appreciate the fact that you are doing a great job collecting the taxes as well. So thank you, Robert and Rick. Are there any other questions or comments on this item?
Hector, I'll let you finish, Hector. This is Holmes. Again, thank you, Mr. Myers and Mr. Bostwick. Appreciate it. 4 years on the council now. This report is always great.
and you always show great performance on the collection of those delinquent accounts. And as Rick said in his presentation, and as the mayor and councilman have said, we're sensitive to folks who have hit a rough patch. We're willing to work with those folks in a thoughtful, like how Rick said it, in a thoughtful, dignified, and sensitive fashion. Thanks for your work there, not only in the collection process, but on the sensitivity process on getting the work done. And as always, as I've done before, I want to thank the citizens of Waco for paying their taxes on time. We're only dealing with a very small portion of the overall tax base here, and it helps council, budget the city services and the fire and police protection with a little more predictability as we're able to collect most of the taxes on time. I had one quick question, Rick and Robert. Were the 44.6% in the first 90 days? I was going to go back and look at last year's, but is that about the same, right around 50% for the first 90 days of the effort?
Yeah.
Yeah. We routinely do that. Last year it was a little off, but routinely in past years it's in that range, and it's a great response from our citizens and taxpayers.
Great. Thanks again. Great job. Go ahead, Hector.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for the presentation. I did have a couple questions for you, if that's okay. It looks like this year was another great year of collections. But with 2020 being the year of the pandemic, what would you say collections for next year? If you have an idea of, do you think we will see a drastic change in that, or a minimal change, or do you think it will be impacted at all?
I may say, Mr. Councilman Acevedo, that's a very cloudy crystal ball to look into. You had a very good year in tax collections here, and the first chart I showed dealt with your current collections. Bear in mind, most of those collections occurred through January 31st through February 1st when the taxes become delinquent. And of course, the pandemic and the circumstances we're dealing with have not really impacted our community, and so. And from that time forward through the collection season, it was difficult to gauge. We still had very strong collections on a monthly basis through that period of time. Whether the stimulus that was provided filtered through our citizens and taxpayers and into the tax office, or other circumstances enable people to continue to pay their taxes despite the fact they may be having some economic troubles. In a go-forward basis for the current year, how those problems are going to impact your collections is very difficult to see. But I had talked to the city staff in this past year, and looking back over a 20-year period track record of the city's property tax collections, even when you had similar circumstances, the city's collection rates probably dropped somewhere between 1%, maybe 2% at the most. And so even if you do see a reduction in collections, it would not be a substantial amount that hopefully would not impact the ability of the city to provide the services that it does.
Thank you for that. And then the other question I had was, it kind of goes along with what Councilmember Holmes asked earlier. We collected like 46% of the taxes from July through September. Is there a reason why we don't start until July 1st getting that information? Like, why we don't get it sooner?
Well, the way property tax collections and delinquent collections works under our state law is taxes are assessed as of October every year. They become delinquent if not paid by the next February, and then they're referred to our firm on July 1. And so they, under state law and the arrangement we have with the city, that's just when they're turned over to us. And frankly, when they're turned over to us in July, the city actually imposes an additional collection fee that offsets our fee, our costs. So all of our services that we provide for the city in collections are not at any expense to the city in any of the collection activities we undertake. So it's how the state law is set up to operate.
And then the only thing I want to end with is to Robert's point about this past year, the collections being down because of those refunds due to lawsuit settlements for prior years just by the appraisal district. We understand the impact that has. This year was particularly just kind of onerous in terms of, a few very large cases with multiple years were all settled at once. But appraisal district staff we're working with them to make sure that we're doing better to communicate the possibilities. It's hard to kind of, conjecture in terms of what lawsuit settlements will kind of turn out at, but we want to make sure that all of our entities' finance departments at least have, they're at least communicated with and have an understanding about the possibility for something like that happening in the future when those cases are going through trial, when that possibility does arise.
Thank you, John. Any further questions or comments? All right, Rick and Robert, thank you both very much for making that presentation. And I also want to thank Jennifer Ritchie for continued good work with outside counsel. It's just a great example. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, our next work session on the agenda, Mayor and Council, is work session 2020-799. Again, we'll be joined by a couple of participants. This is a discussion of proposed small business programs operated by the McLennan Community Investment Fund, MCIF for short, and Waco Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Collaborative, doing business as Startup Waco. As the council will recall, in 2020, you and staff worked together to really add small business support to our economic development toolbox. And today we're going to hear about taking an additional step forward in continuing to build the support that we provide to small businesses, particularly those that are unbanked or underbanked. The two programs you're going to hear about in a few minutes are seeking to utilize $100,000 of the $300,000 that the council specifically allocated in its fiscal year 21 budget for small business support programs. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Galen Price, our interim assistant city manager, for further comments as well as introductions of our speakers this afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As Bradley mentioned, you're going to hear from two agencies today who are seeking to collaborate with the City of Waco regarding continuing efforts to support small businesses here in our community and its small business ecosystem. As you recall, this effort started as part of our COVID-19 response with the establishment of the Small Business Recovery Grant Fund. Through the fund, the need for additional resources and initiatives were identified, and you as a council graciously committed to continued assistance through the FY21 budgets via the general fund and our CDBG dollars. This afternoon, Mr. Bill Vance with the McLennan Community Investment Fund and Mr. John Pasavant with Startup Waco will be discussing their respective programs and how they can assist with supporting small businesses here in the Waco area. As Bradley mentioned earlier, there are two items for your consideration on tonight's agenda in support of these programs. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Vance to discuss the McLennan Community Investment Fund first, and then you'll hear from Mr. Pasavant regarding Startup Waco's program.
Thank you, Mayor Deaver and members of the City Council. On behalf of the McLennan Community Investment Fund, thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation in support of our funding request. May I introduce our board members who are in the virtual audience. Jane Allen, retired banker and owner of a small business in Waco. Tom Chase, chairman, Insurers Indemnity Company of Waco. Alfred Solano, CEO of the Syntex Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And of course, your fellow council member, Andrea Barfield. We began this journey to become a certified community development financial institution in January of this year, and we have made substantial progress in working toward this goal. Thanks to tremendous local support, including this council's, our application for a technical assistance grant was approved by the CDFI Fund in September. The first installment of funds has arrived, and we are on track to employ an executive director and open an office in downtown Waco early in January of 2021. To elaborate on the significance of CDFIs, I would like to make some key points. Federal dollars are available to aid small businesses who do not have access to regular bank lending. To get access to those federal dollars, there must be a certified CDFI. Among the requirements for certification is that the organization be a financing entity that is, in the regular course of lending money. McLennan Community Investment Fund now qualifies as a CDFI in all respects except one. We are not yet a regular financing entity. The City of Waco can help us become a financing entity by approval of the funding request that is now before you. Our funding request is $50,000. Of that amount, we are requesting that $10,000 be allocated to operational expenses that the technical assistance grant will not cover. The remaining $40,000 will be placed in our permanent loan fund, and because repayments of principal of loans will be redeposited to the fund, that portion of your funding will be available for lending to small businesses for the foreseeable future. And that amount added to other funding we have secured will allow us to be a financing entity and hopefully achieve certification as a CDFI next year. I would also like to say a few words about how our organization plans to begin in January. We anticipate opening our office at Startup Waco, another city-funded organization. There are many opportunities for cooperation and coordination with Startup Waco. Our executive director will not be parked in the office. He or she will be on the street seeking small businesses who can benefit from the loans we will offer, and will assist them in completing their loan applications. For small businesses who lack business skills, we will offer development assistance to help them succeed. By April 30th, we will hire an assistant to the executive director, and one or both of those individuals will be Spanish speaking. Our documents will be available in both English and Spanish. We will coordinate and cooperate with other city-funded organizations, including the 2 minority chambers of commerce, to achieve maximum benefit from the available dollars. While it's hard to anticipate demand, we believe that our loans will range from $5,000 to $15,000, although we can go higher, and have a 5-year term and be at competitive interest rates. We commend the city for what you've done and are doing for economic development. A certified CDFI is another means of achieving economic development at a different level, that of helping small businesses gain access to financial resources to allow them to start and grow. Financial support from the City of Waco will speak volumes to CDFI Fund and to other local organizations who may be inclined to support this community development effort. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Judge Vance. Appreciate that great presentation and the work that you all are doing and planning to do. Are there any questions or comments from council members at this point? Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Judge Vance, thank you so much for that presentation and just what the McLennan Community Investment Fund is doing here, fulfilling a need that we have in the city right now. And as a city, and I think John Passavant, as he comes on too, I kind of want to wait till both of them, but I'll pick on Judge here again. I like the CDFI concept and what we're doing and the vision here on this. I think this is money well invested by the city. And again, our city's seen a lot of prosperity over the last 4 and 5 years, and which has created some micro business activity, which I love seeing that because that's really what makes Waco Waco, these smaller businesses. And as COVID hit this last summer, some of these smaller micro businesses have hit, the businesses come to a screeching halt. So I think both of these programs, as we hear John talk as well, very timely. And as Galen said before the judge's presentation, our Small Business Relief Fund, as we look at, I think we have a lot of programs coming together at the right time for Waco businesses, small businesses, because we care. This council cares, this community cares, and we want to see these small businesses become bankable, which I think is a part of McKIF's goal. So ROI is very important. And I think as we put this money back into the small business community, as we see the vaccine come next year and hopefully see better times ahead, I think this is all, again, everything is coalescing at a great juncture here. And I appreciate the leadership of Judge Vance in getting this program put together. Thanks, Judge.
And I'll just echo that. And yeah, thank Judge and Tom particularly in getting this up and running. a certified CDFI has been an identified gap within our community for a long time. And if we can help prime the pump to kind of get the lending activity started and help you get that actual certification, I mean, it unlocks so many additional resources at the federal level and at the private foundation level as well. There have been 7-figure grants that we have looked at that we can't even apply for because you have to have a partnering CDFI to be part of that application. And so I'm very excited about this project. I'm so thankful to you guys for putting in the work to kind of get it started. Happy to be a part of coming alongside and providing some lending capital to help get you guys going and help get you to that certified stage. At which time, I mean, just the opportunities will proliferate once you have that certification, and the leverage you'll be able to provide and the resources you'll be able to bring in this community to further promote and support our small businesses will be great. So yeah, thanks again for all the work you've done, and I'm fully in support of this.
Thank you. We are committed to being certified at the earliest possible date.
Thank you, Judge Vance, for your presentation. I clearly am on board and advocate for in support of this. One of the things that I'll say is, as we find the best in the situation we're presented in, this was the response that we've taken as a council and as a city regarding small businesses to COVID-19. This allowed that domino to be pushed over. So now all of the things that had been in place and the pieces that individually were working and functioning now have a pattern and a cohesive path to follow. And I think that the addition of the CDFI is just that big hammer that we've been needing, as Councilmember Kennard mentioned, because there are so many things that we were not eligible for without a supporting CDFI within our community. And now, because of the work that has been put in place, we now get in the game in that way as well. So we are just doing everything that we can to continue to help foster and grow our economic ecosystem, our entrepreneurial ecosystem, our small businesses, as well as our large businesses, and so that we can keep these dollars moving within our community. So I do appreciate all the efforts that the board has committed to this process and progress, Judge Vance and your leadership, as well as our city partners and county partners for getting in line and working with us as a CDFI.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Judge Vance. I guess Bradley or Galen will be ready to hear from Mr. Paspan.
Yes, is he on the line? I think Judge is going to stay with us in case there's questions at the end. But John, will you? I think you've got some slides. Why don't you share your screen and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Bradley, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for this opportunity. It's I felt in the little over a year that I've been in Waco that a huge advantage that Waco has is its ability for its leadership and its organizations to work together and to identify need and to collaborate. And so these two programs and organizations coming alongside in the ways that we've have been planning and talking about doing, I think, is a great example of that. I join all of you in applauding Judge Vance's efforts in establishing a CDFI. I think it's an absolutely necessary piece of the ecosystem that we need to have. But as you all know, especially in times like we've experienced in this past year, in some cases, it's the more that we can do for businesses when it comes to giving them access to capital to try to weather an economic reality like we've had this year, the better. And this program that we've been partnering with Kiva as a representation of targeting the same, essentially the same demographic of businesses, but with a different tool that we hope will capture even more as we combine those resources. And I think it's important to note that, as Judge Vance said, we've been in preliminary talks of having the CDFI established here at Startup Waco, which provides a seamless integration of businesses coming through. So we'll be able to really get to know those businesses, pass them through, and help them get the best support that they need, whether it's this or whether it's through CDFI directly. So to give you just a little bit of background regarding Kiva and how this came about, we at Startup Waco were aiming to build an inclusive and powerful ecosystem that bridges many of the racial and socioeconomic gaps. So we wanted every entrepreneur to have the tools that they need to succeed, and many of those are more available to some than others. What Kiva allows us to do is it's a unique, innovative solution to provide zero interest, zero fee loans to small businesses. And it was created to fill the gap in the capital ladder to give people an entry point. And so they can do this as the largest crowd lending platform in the world. Kiva has a global presence. Businesses post profiles similar that you would on an equity crowdfunding platform, but they do it with lending. These aren't donations. These aren't equity investments. These are loans that are paid back over time. Kiva began its work in third world countries, and it has since in the last about 2 years have turned it back to the U.S. and created hub organizations throughout the United States to help implement these loans. And along with that, they work with the hub organization provides key financial literacy and advisory services alongside. This is a little bit of historical data around what Kiva has lent out. And if you want to know the types of people that they're lending to, this is directly in the target source of the types of businesses that we want to affect. Borrowers, 68% are women, 71% of the borrowers are minorities. And really what it is targeting the credit invisible, as they put it. Essentially, 60% of borrowers that were previously rejected, and borrowers that have less than ideal credit. This graph here is probably the best graph for all of you as council members to make a decision here of how and where Kiva and the CDFIs and the other institutions, as we go up the capital chain, where that sort of fits. And this is how we sort of see Kiva, regardless of what the loan amount that a CDFI will target. This is something that we'll figure out based on need and based on businesses that are coming through the door. And again, that's why it's so important that we all work together and work collaboratively. I think the most important thing is that if there's a business out there looking to be funded and has a need for capital, that we have a solution and a tool to meet that need for them and to provide something for them. And that's why these programs work so well together. This is just a little bit to let you know about how Kiva can offer zero interest, zero fee loans. They essentially provide the technical assistance. They do all the training and onboarding. They open up a global lending network of risk-tolerant capital because it's donated by over 1.7 million lenders that are motivated by social impact and not by a return, clearly, because there's no interest. And what we do here as the hub at Startup Waco is that we provide boots on the ground, that we are the local champion for these types of programs to businesses, so that businesses know they exist and they can engage them. We engage other aspects of the community, other organizations, and whether they be corporate partners or individuals. And then we also cover the cost to operate the program, which is having somebody here on staff to help manage it, also pay all of the fees to Kiva to underwrite and manage the loans. This is a picture of the 30 cities currently in America that operate hub organizations. Waco will be, as you can see, the first in Texas to do so. Kiva has made loans throughout parts of Texas before, but there has not been a hub. Austin, in pretty short order, will be one, and Dallas will eventually be one as well, but we'll be the first. And that's important. Mainly, there's credibility there, but it's mainly important because there are certain foundations outside of Waco that have aligned with Kiva and that have very large multi-million-dollar Kiva loan funds, the Dell Family Foundation being one of them. And those funds are directed to invest in businesses through Kiva in the state of Texas. And as the only hub that's operating it, it opens up to quite a bit extra funding for our local businesses than we would have otherwise. And so we felt it was a timely moment to push. But we'll be one of 30 cities in the U.S. to operate a hub for this program. They've operated $40 million in crowdfunding loans to date in the past just under 2 years. They've lent to over 1,200 cities and over 6,500 small businesses. We want to test this. We want to make sure that this is effective before we jump in and even go bigger. So the program that we're proposing to council is to run from mid-December and go through mid-summer. I think that's going to be a lot more time than we need to hit our goals, but we wanted to give ourselves this extra time. And the project is to pilot this initiative to make sure that businesses are engaging in it, that it's useful, that it's accomplishing the things that we want it to do. We aim to fund a minimum of 10 loans. This was Kiva's recommendation to demonstrate the real critical need within your community. If you can fund 10 in your first cycle, then it demonstrates that there's a lot more out there to follow. And so that is going to be our goal. The effective funding requirements for this is a $25,000 a year fee to Kiva to operate all of the underwriting, and we will. Startup Waco is contributing $10,000 of that, and the Kauffman Foundation is committed $15,000 of that, which is another great way of partnering with a national foundation towards business development and small business development, like the Kauffman Foundation. It's a great thing for Waco to be aligned with them. And then we're also going to be covering the cost of the capital asset manager, and they'll be working closely with the CDFI as well and with the executive director that they're hiring here. So there truly is a really great combination of these two programs. Our request to council is for $50,000 to put into a loan fund. This, similar to the CDFI's request, would be in a revolving evergreen fund. Once that money is lent out, it will be returned back and can be relent to businesses in the future. The way that we're structuring this is through a matching. So since this is crowd lending, businesses will raise 50% of their loan request. And then the city funds, until they're depleted, will fund the other 50%. And what that does is just greases the wheels to get more loans through quickly, to get the program set up. So I'm very grateful for everyone that has been a support of this and been working to help see this happen. And I'm proud of Waco for being innovative in this way, to look for innovative solutions to real problems. And thank you all for letting me share about this. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that any of you have.
All right, thank you, John. I think several council members have questions and comments, so let's get to those right away. Councilmember Savito, would you like to begin?
Yes, sir. John, thank you so much for your presentation. And I have to say that I really like the approach that we're taking with our small businesses, especially focusing on MWBEs. We saw a huge need for that when the pandemic first hit and the city launched the Small Business Recovery Fund, and how it was so beneficial and helpful to excuse me, those businesses that just needed it during that time. Earlier in his presentation, Judge Vance talked about the importance of having some bilingual staff members. May I ask what are Kiva's plans for reaching to our Spanish-speaking businesses as well?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have a Spanish-speaking person on staff at Startup Waco. They're committed to be present at any meetings when that's required, when translation is required. Kiva does have Spanish-speaking documents and Spanish-speaking staff as well for all of the actual underwriting and lending. So we're ready to go from day one to provide bilingual services the whole way around.
This is Holmes. I'll jump in here. John, thanks for the presentation. Great presentation. I was lucky enough to serve on the mayor's COVID response team on economic recovery with John as a representative of Startup Waco. And John's can-do attitude is amazing. We had Startup Waco, the three chambers, Greater Waco Hispanic Chamber and African American Chamber, and tackled the program that Galen was talking about before, the Small Business Relief Fund, and set that up and got it all funded. So that breaking ground with that, I think, gives me great confidence in Startup Waco's sponsorship of this program with Kiva. And it just develops another avenue for small businesses to access capital and stay open. So I appreciate Startup Waco taking this on, and John, I'm optimistic that we'll have success here, and I'm very supportive of this program. Thanks.
And I'll just echo all that. I appreciate the work he's put into this. I mean, it is just like the CDFI, it's another arrow in the quiver to help support our small businesses that have traditionally lacked access to capital, and does so in an innovative, collaborative, and accessible way. And that this one as well, that part of the hub, the whole platform, is to provide the technical assistance and some of the wraparound services to help make sure those businesses succeed. And as John very acutely pointed out, will help leverage additional resources not only from the Kauffman Foundation but some others around the state as well. And being the first one in the state does work. And in this program did arise out of a collaboration, sort of a bubbling up a technical conference between Kauffman Foundation and National League of Cities. And so on that map of the other hubs, the ones highlighted are ones that are currently in a kind of a technical assistance cohort where NLC provides some backup assistance, and there are other learning opportunities amongst these other cities that are doing it to help promote best practices and unlock additional resources and make sure that provides an additional layer of input and backup to make sure that these programs are successful. So I'm thankful for John and Startup Waco taking the initiative with this and sticking their necks out and bringing it. I think it's another great thing for the community, and I'm very supportive of it.
Hey, John, this is Darius. I was just curious. I know that you guys at Startup Waco cover just myriad of needs for businesses and entrepreneurs. I know specifically with the Incubate X254. Do you foresee that sort of being a potential feeding sort of system into this revolving loan program, or are you focusing that elsewhere? Want to make sure that we're using everything at the highest and best that we can. And if there's collaboration to be had, especially if it's already in-house, that if it makes sense, that's something that we're considering and pushing play on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So, like we would if we were a standard for-profit business, we would sort of lead with whatever ask we think would get somebody in the door, and then we try to upsell them into whatever we can get them to buy from us. This is the same idea, but it gives us, as a nonprofit, we're here to help and we're here to collaborate and support. So if we offer any of the programs that we have, whether it's marketing support or mentoring or networking, if they come in and we can identify needing capital, well, now all this is the tool to be able to say, instead of saying, oh, you need capital here, we've identified this need. You say, oh, you need capital, and here's a tool to consider, and here's a CDFI, another tool to consider, and here, we want to build out that entire roadmap for someone. So as they come in, they're not just sort of said, here's what you need to do and sent out, but they said, here's what you need, and here's a list of tools that you can just take the next step to help them do it. So every program we do is absolutely a feeder, and I would even say, like the loan, the Small Business Relief Fund that this council stood up. We had over 700 businesses apply in the first week for that whenever it came out. And so we have a database of need. And so if we ever need to go on the offensive to go out there and really advertise, we can do that as well. And so I'm confident in the team that we all have, and working together with all of these organizations, that we're able to really make sure that everyone who needs capital knows that they have a place to go to find it and take a step.
All right, any other questions or comments? Great, John, thank you very much. I really appreciate the great work that you're doing at Startup Waco, and appreciate you bringing this forward with the partnership with Kauffman Foundation. Good stuff. And Judge Vance, thank you again for your presentation and for the work you all are doing with the CDFI. And I want to thank Galen and your staff, as well as the legal staff, who have worked hard to bring both these projects quickly forward. And so thanks for all the hard work that's going into that. And I will turn it back over to Bradley for our next work session presentation.
Thanks, Mayor. This is our last work session that I'll cover today. It's work session 2020-800, which is an update and discussion of the Waco Bus Rapid Transit Preliminary Engineering and National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, review. The BRT, as we call it, that stands for Bus Rapid Transit Project, really sits at the intersection of several council priorities, namely quality of life and economic development, certainly, as well as equitable services. In fact, the council will recall in 2014, our economic development strategic plan which we call the Upjohn Report, discussed major issues that Waco should be working on to connect economically disadvantaged neighborhoods to job centers, and specifically highlighted the need to reduce our up to 2-hour bus ride from a person's home to a quality job opportunity. And it's with that in mind, the council's invested at this point more than $1.2 million in pursuing the BRT system, which would ultimately represent a very significant reboot in how transit works in Waco. Today's presentation is going to provide an update of our current project progress, as well as kind of peek ahead at station designs and current thought process on next steps and our schedule. I'm pleased at this point to turn the presentation over to Serena Stevenson, our General Manager of Waco Transit, who will preside over the presentation, as well as introduce several members of our BRT consulting team. Serena, are you there?
Serena's there. She's on mute, and we have several that we'll be promoting, so it may take just a little bit.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. As many of you may recall, on April 30th of 2019, the City Council of Waco authorized the submittal of a letter requesting entry into the project development of the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Improvement Grant Program for the Waco Rapid Transit Corridor. Additionally, Council approved in fiscal year 2019's budget funding in the amount of $1.2 million for the project development phase. On July the 29th of 2019, Waco Transit System received notification the Waco Rapid Transit Corridor was accepted into the project development phase. In the fall of 2019, Waco Transit System worked with the City of Waco's purchasing department and began the process of developing a request for qualifications for firms to submit their credentials for the BRT project in order to complete preliminary engineering and the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA compliance. On March the 9th of 2020, the RFQ was advertised for 30 days. Waco Transit System, along with the evaluation team, consisting of members from the MPO and the City of Waco, rated the proposal, finalized additional contract needs, and awarded the contract on June the 16th of 2020 to AECOM to complete this stage in the process. The City of Waco, Waco Transit System, Region 6 of the Federal Transit Administration, AECOM, and the MPO met on August the 3rd for a kickoff meeting for this project. This presentation by Paulette Vanderkamp, the project manager for AECOM, and the AECOM team will provide an update of the Waco Bus Rapid Transit preliminary engineering and environmental review and explain the next phases in the project. Paulette.
All right, thank you, Serena, for the introduction and overview. And thank you, Mayor and council members, for your time this afternoon. What you can see here up on your screens is our agenda for our presentation today. We're going to kind of go over the structure of our project team, review the feasibility study that has been done previously, previous phase. Our task leads are going to give an overview of scope, task overview and status of those scope items, and we're also going to cover public involvement for the entirety of the project. This is just an overview. This is a map that's been created and it's up on our project website, an overview of the corridor. It is 13.3 miles approximately, starting in Woodway through Beverly Hills, downtown Waco, and Belmead, and ending in Lacey Lakeview. There are 14 stations, and 2 of those you see highlighted in red are future proposed, what we call infill stations. I might point out there's a couple of these that as we're progressing into preliminary engineering have changed. We've gone from looking at an intersection at 26th Street to 25th. So this has been updated on this map, and 35th Street to 32nd. So there are a few of these station sites that are still in a little bit of state of flux as we go through the design process. So this is just an overview structure of our team. Again, I'm the project manager for AECOM. Tim Simon with Alliance Transportation Group, ATG, as the Deputy Project Manager. They were also teamed with AECOM on the previous phase for the feasibility study. We have many of our major task leads with us to present. Bill Crowley, Melinda, not Melinda, I'm going to be presenting for Melinda. Gavin and Abby are here to present with us today. I also want to mention that CP&Y is also on our team. They are conducting field survey, and utility work for the project. Just an overview of the scope, and as Serena mentioned, this phase of the project, FTA refers to as project development, and we got entry into this back in 2019, in the summer of 2019. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the biggest focus on this phase of the project is preliminary design and the environmental clearance, as well as financial assessment of the project for that rating for the Small Starts funding process. And that's what we are focused on, those three major efforts, as well as, again, stakeholder and community outreach throughout the process. So just some of the early project tasks that I'm not going to go through the first 4 or 5, those have already been completed, but we are conducting agency coordination with Texas Historical Commission, TxDOT, FTA, a number of agencies kicking off that coordination. We've submitted our what FTA refers to as basis of design or design criteria for review by Waco Transit, the MPO, the city, and soon we will be submitting that to TxDOT as well for review. We have conducted public outreach in October, our initial reintroduction of the project. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And then our biggest focus again is station location siting. Those stations are very important for us to then be able to kick off the environmental phase of the project. It's assumed that maintenance for the project would be conducted at the existing maintenance facility, bus maintenance facility. This is an overview of our project schedule. As you can see here in the second week of November, we've completed some of our early tasks, like I mentioned before, and we've kicked off everything. Some of those, especially that we're in the midst of preliminary engineering and environmental review. But just a couple of weeks ago, we kicked off our financial assessment of the project governance as well plan. We are anticipating a work session in January. Gavin will talk a little bit more about that to kind of get the plan together for that financial assessment of the project in order to go into the Small Starts rating analysis process. So again, here's the October stakeholder outreach. We have another one coming up in December, the second week in December. And then when preliminary engineering and NEPA are completed, we would go out to the public again in February. So some of the project goals that have been carried over from the feasibility study, increasing the efficiency of operations and decreasing overall transit travel times, increasing access to employment opportunities and critical services that have been mentioned before. Specifically, really for this phase of the project, though, leveraging available local, state, and federal funding opportunities. Again, that financial assessment that we're going to be turning to at the beginning of the year. We're also looking with that rating in mind at project goals, providing safe and reliable transit service, and supporting and promoting economic growth. Those are all areas that this project will be rated on in that FTA Small Starts process, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Simon. He's going to go over a review of the feasibility study and kind of a high-level overview of BRT in general.
Thank you, Paulette. So what is BRT and why BRT? So this all began as a way to explore how to improve connectivity and reduce travel time and really just improve transit in Waco. And I've looked at high capacity transit early on, exploring whether it's, what's feasible in Waco, and where they landed was BRT as opposed to something like light rail. BRT provides that reliable, safe service that's very frequent, and not because there's a bus every 15 minutes, there's limited stop spacing, but it also accomplishes some of those benefits of light rail transit without as high as a price ticket. So you get transit-oriented development around the stations. and really get that economic boost. So it's really a project for the community and not just those who ride transit. Next slide. So with the last feasibility study, we had 3 alignments, and we ended up with alignment 2, our preferred alignment that scored highest on all the criteria you see here. And here's a map of the corridor that I think Paulette showed you another one as well. You see here, the operational costs, some of the just assumptions about it. And so now we're taking this corridor and moving it on and advancing it through the process. Look at the preliminary engineering, really drill down into the corridor to see what the footprints for each of those stations. And our first task here is actually updating the feasibility study, seeing what's changed since we last did this, so dusting it off, so to speak, and making sure what conditions are changed, such as the Franklin-Washington couplet. Go to the next slide. Ridership. How has ridership changed in Waco? And currently, we're looking at pre-COVID numbers, and look at that, we see an 11% increase overall. Looking at Baylor, Waco Transit, and the shuttles. And then we'll be conducting a lot of route planning and have started to looking at all the service components such as frequency, dwell time, service span, when does service start and how does it connect with the underlying fixed route service, and all that will have downstream impacts that Gavin's going to talk about, operation and costs. Thank you.
So Paulette mentioned and Tim touched on too is that the general goal here is to just keep the bus in motion more. So a typical arterial BRT or a bus is about in motion about half the time. So other times you're waiting for passengers to get on board or you're waiting for the bus to get through traffic. So in the next slide, we just show what the pie chart can look like. When you implement bus rapid transit, you're simply trying to get the bus in motion more. Less traffic delays, less passenger delays. So how do we do that? There's operational improvements with transit signal priority. And then there's also just improvements that we can do to the waiting environment at each station. So it's improving customer amenities as well as operational improvements. One of the things that really reduces dwell time, and when Tim talked about dwell time, is just that when the bus comes in, how fast do people get on the bus and take off? So here's a few different options. If you look at the center option, that's where the platform is raised up. In all of these cases, the platform is raised up to make boarding and alighting easier. In the middle case, we've got the sidewalk raised up as well. On the left, the sidewalk is at a lower elevation. And then on the right is more of a constrained environment where you may just have pedestrians passing through. And the next slide is why this is important. It's just, it increases the footprint here. It's a great thing. The benefits improve accessibility and reduce that dwell time, but it does, and it shows that sense of permanence there. This image is from Grand Rapids. And the reason I want to say we have to be careful there is just that it does extend the footprint. We have to make sure the grades all work out. And all the impacts that may come from raising that platform about 12 inches above the roadway. Sorry. Next slide. And then passenger amenities, we're talking about off-board fare collections, also make this a little bit quicker, getting on and off the bus. Emergency phones to just feel safer. This image on the left is from Cleveland. I think John may have seen this Cleveland line, but that went operational in 2008, so it's 12 years old. Since then, amenities have gotten better, or simpler as well. On the right here is an image from Portland, Oregon. It's pretty much like an iPad that sits on a post. It gives you real-time bus information, cheap, easy, things that can be done very simply. So we'll look at operations and maintenance as well as capital costs. In the next slide, one of the big drivers in the capital costs is the question of whether what propels the buses? Is it compressed natural gas? Is it a battery electric bus? So there's CNG, there's BEV, a lot of different acronyms. We were talking about electric buses, and some of these images show what it might look like. At the end of line, you'd have maybe an overhead pantograph that charges the bus. You would want that over time to make sure that as the battery ages, you have the ability to give it a 15-minute boost somewhere offline. But then also at the facility, you would need to do some upgrades such that all the buses could be plugged in at night. Another thing at the end of the line is a comfort station. The image in the top left is from Pittsburgh. A comfort station is simply a restroom only for bus operators. It's usually a modular shelter that comes in at the end of line. If we were putting in electric facilities, it'd probably be in around the same location. Those are just things that will drive costs, and we'll want to talk about those earlier rather than later. Go ahead, Paulette, you're muted though.
Sorry about that. So another one of our tasks, major tasks, with FTA being our lead agency, the Environmental Review, or NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. We've got to conduct an environmental analysis on the corridor. That being said, because this is a footprint within it, mostly within existing right-of-way, FTA has designated this project as a categorical exclusion, which is short CE. It's a streamlined NEPA document consisting of, a worksheet. It's a pretty easy format for the documentation, with just a few of those areas of environmental analysis that take a little bit more documentation. This is a list of some of those areas of resources that we'll be studying along the corridor, and those designated with the asterisk are those that will require supporting documentation attached to that CE worksheet. As we've been citing stations, this is something that we've been working with FTA, area of potential effects. This is basically the footprint that we look at in a graphic form of the area offset for environmental clearance. So as you can see at these intersections, we've got the green areas located for platforms here, but we've extended this area, this APE area, to be a little on the conservative side in case some of these stations may slide into the next, near side or far side locations. We want to make sure that we don't we'll have to go back and do additional coordination with THC, Texas Historical Commission, if we do have allow a little bit of wiggle room in our area that we're studying. So that's just a graphical representation, and those maps we're getting ready to send to THC for their review here this week. Gavin?
So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our governance and funding scope and work. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a peer review, and if we look at what other smaller transit agencies that have bus or transit, how they're organized and how that works out, and they're going to make specific recommendations for Waco Transit. On the funding side, we're going to take a look at both capital and O&M and kind of see where we're at and how we can make sure we're planning for the future before we make a large capital investment, that we have a way to kind of fund that. And we also want to take a look at what COVID has to do with the revenues and how does that change things going forward. It's going to include looking at both the small starts and then the bus and bus facilities grant programs. One of the things, the small starts program that Paulette had kind of alluded to earlier, which is the program that we're currently in. This is looking at major capital and transit investments in a defined corridor that includes substantial or defined stations, transit signal priority that Bill was talking a little bit about, and then short bidirectional headways. And that's going to be all day long. So for a 14-hour span of service, ranging from 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on how we structure that during that 14-hour period. And we are looking for projects that have a capital cost less than $300 million and that are requesting less than $100 million from the Small Starts Grant Program. The Small Starts Grant Program is a multi-year, multi-step program. This project is currently in project development. And then while there, we're going to be completing the environmental review that Paula was talking about. We're also going to develop this information sufficient to evaluate and rate the project for a Small Starts Grant agreement. FTA rates projects for that agreement on the next slide with 2 equally weighted criterion: project justification and local financial commitment. Project justification is based on 6 equally weighted criterion: congestion relief, environmental benefits, cost effectiveness, mobility, economic development, and existing land use. And then there are 3 local financial commitment criterion, the most important of which of those is the reasonableness of your financial plan and cost estimates, and then the commitment of funds and your current financial condition are next. And the goal is to get a medium for both of those overall, or higher. Paul's going to talk to you a little bit about schedule for the project.
Still need it. Project milestone schedule. Again, I've highlighted here where we're at in starting in August of 2020 and ending in February 2021, the preliminary engineering and NEPA. That rating in August-September timeframe, submittal of the application next year for FTA recommendation that would follow in this early springtime of the following year in 2022. Here, final design would start right as preliminary engineering is wrapping up. Basically, about a 1.5 year time frame for that, while we're still working on the rating process, the analysis for the financial assessment and recommendation to FTA. So with the construction grant agreement, after that, another 18 months for construction and vehicle procurement with an opening day. What we're looking at is the end of 2023. So I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to talk about our public involvement, what we have already done in October, and a look ahead to our outreach that's coming up in December.
Thanks, Paulette. Our first task out of the gate was updating our public involvement plan from the feasibility study to prepare for the current phase. We knew that the project found a lot of community support during the early phase, so we wanted to make sure to key back into those same stakeholders and get them re-engaged in the process. As part of the planning process, we also worked to identify a mix of traditional and virtual outreach strategies to employ on the project. Obviously, we're pretty limited when it comes to sort of the traditional high-touch strategies that we would normally use. But there are some low-contact, non-virtual strategies that we have employed on the project to generate interest. We also worked on our key messaging, education efforts on BRT as a mode choice and the benefits of BRT, and sort of general education on the environmental process. And finally, obviously, we do all of this through coordination across FTS and the city teams with input and approval from the FTA. So we developed the public involvement process to really align with the project development process and interject public feedback when it's most relevant to making decisions on the project. Last month, we launched with a kickoff outreach efforts, and next month we'll return to the community to share information about stops, spacing, location, design for those stations and stops. We'll also continue to share information about the environmental study and early engineering process. In February, we'll return to the community with the results of the preliminary engineering and environmental analysis for review and feedback. As I mentioned, we worked in October and early November to share initial information with the community and get feedback. This really worked as a project refresher and a preview of the environmental and engineering process to come. We focused mostly on a virtual open house format, which allowed community members to absorb information at their own pace and provide feedback when convenient. The site was offered in both English and Spanish, and we received more than 200 unique visits. It's really important to us and to WTS to pair virtual outreach strategies with lower tech strategies. for those with limited access or comfort with the internet. What you see on this slide is our program of advertisement and engagement opportunities that drove interest in the virtual open house, but also function as standalone engagement opportunities. To ensure we engage with users of the current system, we utilize posters in high traffic areas in the existing system and PA system messaging at the transit terminal. And to offer the community lower tech options to learn more about the project and provide feedback, we mailed postcards, pushed out information via the news media, ran newspaper ads, and placed posters at high traffic places like libraries, community centers, and City Hall. In addition to the virtual open house, community members could leave a message on our comment line to share information and feedback. And again, all of this outreach was conducted in both English and Spanish. In December, our engagement activities will look a lot like in October in terms of tactics, but we'll have new information to share and get feedback on related to stop and station design and location. We'll also have more information to share regarding the environmental study. Because this information is a little bit more technical in nature, we plan to incorporate a live virtual event so that the community can interact directly with the project team and ask questions through a moderated Q&A session. And though our engagement is really focused around Major Milestone, the project team remains available to provide information and receive feedback through the project's comment line, email address, and evergreen webpage on the Waco City website. And those contact information is on the next slide. And that's all for outreach.
Yep, and that is a wrap up of what we have to present on the project. We're open for questions. Any?
Okay. Thank you, Serena, for that presentation, and all of you from AECOM and Tim. Appreciate your really good presentation. Who has questions or comments at this point from council?
Yeah, this was back when Tim was presenting. I'm not sure if I need to ask him the question directly or if anyone can answer, sure. But you had the statistics for ridership and the increase that we saw, the 11% increase in. I was curious, are there other cities that are similar that we can look at to see, or is there just like a general rule of thumb when you implement bus rapid transit, what the increase because of that opportunity typically is? People that otherwise wouldn't have ridden the bus because it was slow or because it was arduous. Is there just a general increase because we have implementing a new streamlined and faster system? Is there any explanation for that?
So as a part of this process, we'll be rerunning the what's known as the FTA stops ridership forecasting model. But it's basically just a way to estimate ridership based on your demographics, your growth rate, and what is going into the project, such as increased frequency and stations and whatnot. So we'll have an estimate of what you can expect to see as a result of the project. And we'll present it in multiple ways. We'll present it in how ridership will grow overall as a system, what trips can be really attributed to the project, but also what trips, are increased from like people getting on your local route to connect into the project. Then to answer your other question, there are some before and after studies, but not a whole lot of them of this size. There's a lot more about light rail and stuff, but there are some case examples for BRT, and I'd be happy to pull together some of those statistics and pass that on if you're interested. I don't know those figures off the top of my head. And maybe if Gavin is still on, he has more.
No, that's great. That answer was more than satisfactory. Thank you for the clarification and
thank you.
That insight.
I'll go next. I don't have much. I mean, we've been talking about this for a good while. I'm excited that we're at this point, ready and hopeful to kind of see it through. I know that once we're done, there are considerable operational costs that are associated with something like this that the city will need to figure out. I guess my only real question at this point has to deal with, given that, when we first were talking about it, we're already a couple of years kind of behind where the original sort of Gantt chart and timeline was. Is there anything you see in terms of potential FTA funding or administration changes or anything that might further delay or kind of undermine our ability to get this done in the y'all's anticipated project completion time?
Gavin, do you want to touch on that from FTA's standpoint? I know or Tim even, we talked a little bit about our ridership modeling and how some of those decisions are still to be made on the methodology for ridership projections. I don't know if you want to go into a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, go ahead, Gavin, too. So it now looks as though we will be having a change in the administration and the people who are making at least some of the decisions at the FTA. Sometimes when there is a transition, that just causes a little bit of delay because there's a little bit of uncertainty as to who the people are who are making decisions and getting them, through approval processes so that they have a process. I don't anticipate, given the fact that we're looking at applying in the fall of 2021, that those really will have a large impact on this project, if that makes sense. Those should be worked out by next summer. I think we'd all like to have confidence that can happen. But that is a realistic possibility that I want to get out there. Another thing that we need to kind of talk through and work through, one of the biggest things that FTA is looking for as they're kind of finalizing those grant agreements are, what are the commitment of local funds and what are the commitments of kind of what they consider to be critical third-party agreements? Are those fully authorized and activated? So those are things that we are working through to try to make sure we don't have surprises that are coming up. If we have real estate transactions that may need to come up or be worked out, those can cause unexpected delays if for some reason we can't do those, or like I said, a lack of that local funding commitment somewhere along the ways. If we're still working through that, which I think was one of the things you had mentioned there, but we are still seeing projects move forward through different administrations. This has been historic. The Capital Investment Grant Program has historically been one of the most popular grant programs with Congress, and that a few years ago they streamlined a lot of the federal funding programs, but into formula programs. But this is one of them that they kept separate, and that was because it's people want to see large projects coming to their districts, and that's kind of why this kind of stayed. So I don't see the program run away. I don't anticipate major changes. Think about it, the current rules were put in place by the Obama administration. So to that extent, I don't see a large change necessarily if a Biden administration were to come in and put in similar thinking individuals making those similar policy decisions.
That's helpful. What's the ratio of kind of projects that have reached the stage where we are at right now, not getting final FTA approval to make this thing happen? How often does that happen? What's the risk there?
There is a risk. Off the top of my head, I can think of 2 or 3 projects that has happened to. I can tell you that those have happened not due to a lack of federal support or a change in federal policy, but a change in local funding support. And one of them, the transit agency was not the city. One of the cities pulled out of funding of the project, and therefore the quality of the application did not go through. I guess the only exception to that would be the Second Avenue subway in New York, in which the current there was a political fight over the size and scale of that project, and I'm sure you can Google and find out more about people with New York history debating.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. Just the last thing to what Bill's comment. Yes, when I was in Cleveland a few years ago for a conference, I did get to visit AECOM's office up there. You were a very gracious host. Did get to ride the Health line. which was a really great system that had drawn in, it's called the Health Line because the Cleveland Clinic helped, pay hundreds of thousands a year to help its promotion. So there are a lot of different, they really cobbled together a lot of different partners and funding sources to make that work. And so I'm sure we'll be able to do the same as we continue to move this one forward. So I appreciate all y'all's work to it at this point. And I will not be in office to see it to completion, but hopefully sometime, hopefully the timeline is right, and in a couple of years we can have this thing ready to go.
This is Holmes. I'm going to echo a lot of what Johnny just said on this. It's been a project that just takes time to vet and to evaluate and to qualify. I know it's in the back of all of our minds as we're prioritizing other things, but really a supporter of getting this in place, particularly taking it back kind of to the point where you saw how the existing system works with the kind of concentric circles that don't really meet, and it takes forever to get across town. So the connectivity, I think, is so important here, particularly as we see folks like Amazon move in, and hope to see some others. Getting from one side of town to the other is going to be very important for our workforce as we go forward. So again, let's keep marching forward on this. I'm still concerned about funding and how we get that all lined up. But I think this is a very worthwhile project, and I look forward to seeing it through here. Thanks.
Thank you, Serena and et al. For this presentation. I had a question about the communications process because, I know that now, especially, all the way we've communicated about everything the past 10 months has changed drastically from the traditional way that we do it. And so if you go to that slide, I want to ask, my question deals with, it says putting like the information in high traffic areas. And I was like, what does that mean now? Because yes, while your transit number, your bus stations and your, buses, inside buses, numbers has changed so greatly. How are we reaching the people who are normally, in mass riding the bus? Your community centers, City Hall, those are things that aren't as active as they used to be. So are we potentially getting and engaging, our community influencers to spread this message and carry this water? Some of the things that we had to do in relaying messages related to COVID-19. I just want to make sure that all of the, if it's incorporating our local churches, our community organizations who have, strong social media presence or strong, activism. So if it's on the announcement boards, I just want to make sure that we are reaching out to groups in different ways, because the way we have are known to engage, we can't do or are not as effective as they once were. So I just wanted to make sure that that's something that we're considering. I know I've seen the commercials. I saw when the news had the thing, I read in the paper. But if we're going for people who aren't looking for it, are they going to be able to receive that information just the same? Because I think that this is a fantastic project, and I think one that will really change the game and elevate the status as far as our workforce solutions that we're seeking. And I just a conversation a few months ago with a corporation who was interested in coming to Waco. The first thing they asked about was transportation and transit. So I think that it's something that we need to make. This is the right path, and we are definitely closing our gap. But I just want to make sure that as we go through the processes of crafting the messaging and getting community input and designs right, we have reached out to exhausted our resources in reaching the people, because I know we have to do things differently now.
So Abby, I don't know if you want to respond to the question there, but social media and some of those other engagements that we have started on with this project. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Abby.
Sure, but I think you're right in the sense of the toolbox. we have a big toolbox for public engagement. We have a lot of different tools in the toolbox. And I think right now, we're still in the process of figuring out what the combination of tools looks like for this sort of new environment that we're working in. I will say, we manage a team across the entire United States. And so we're seeing a lot of the effectiveness of different tools sort of in real time and a lot faster than maybe individual agencies could see just working on their own projects. So we're bringing sort of the best of what we've seen working across the country to this project. And I would definitely highlight the postcard mailings as a huge driver. We've seen those be extremely effective. And, it's a lot of this sort of back to basics approaches, which aren't necessarily like innovative or, you're not seeing something that's like, oh, this crazy new idea, right? We're kind of reaching back to the back of our toolbox and really looking at things that we know have worked in the past over time with sort of these high, contact strategies like the press releases, the postcard mailings. And for the newer, audiences, that social media is critical, and also really high profile postings on the website for WTS. And but ultimately, I think you're right about really needing to key into those community, those people that have the voices in the community. And so we really focus with the postcard mailing on our feasibility on our contact list from the feasibility study. So we know that those people are interested in the project. We know that they were some of them were even advocates for the project before in the feasibility study. So we hope that kind of spurred that action. But I definitely think we can do more to kind of key into those community voices, and we'll definitely highlight, look for more opportunities to do that in our next 2 rounds.
And just to build on that, ATG also led a parallel study during that time, which was the McLennan County Transit Needs Study. So we pooled all our resources from the extensive public outreach from that, and we had all that old stakeholder list, and worked with Abby and her team to make sure those people as well got added to that list. So it's really been as exhaustive as we can, and really a lot of kind of those grassroots traditional methods. Not all the fancy social media and everything. It's just going back to what's tried and true and making sure we reach those people.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I agree with a lot of what John said, and Councilmember Holmes and Bradley's right. This project hits a lot of boxes. And these goals that we're trying to achieve are some of the very heart of what the council has been working towards. I guess the one thing that I'm still a little uncomfortable with is how this project, once it becomes operational, will affect our general fund. What kind of impact do we expect to have there? And I've been listening, but I don't think I've heard that. And maybe we can't say with any certainty what it is right now, but I just hate for us to go down a really long road and then find out, well, we can't afford to operate this. So how do we get comfortable with that? And do you expect this next phase of the feasibility study to help us address that?
Yes, and in fact, that is something that we're going to have to report to the FTA, because as you can imagine, they have a stake in having projects that are successful, and they define projects that are successful as ones that continue to operate. They actually are looking for a 20-year plan. So that is something we're going to have to work through, and that's going to include coming up with developing the anticipated annual operating costs for the project, and then how are we going to fund those costs going forward based on the revenues that you may or may not have available. And we are working, we have a plan to have a working session on that topic in January. I think there were some local appointments and stuff that we're going to try to get worked through in order to have those happen. That's our plan to start that in the new year.
Good. Well, I just think that's critical, and it is certainly a worthy project, and has all kinds of potential. We just need to go into it with our eyes wide open. Any other questions or comments at this point? Thank you all for a really excellent in-depth presentation, and Serena, thanks for your ongoing work. we appreciate everything that's happening here, and look forward to seeing the next steps in this process. Bradley, I believe that is the end of our work session items today. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right. Are there any council requests for future agenda items?
I have a few that I will not get to, participate in, but I think I just want to, if I was sticking around, these are the things I would work on that I think y'all should talk about. Just one, and I mentioned this at the Amazon unveiling, just as we get a report on the progress of the economic development reconfiguration apparatus, and would like to consider the potential for new projects as they are incentivized for a portion of those incremental revenues to be dedicated towards workforce development in some form or fashion, to ensure that we have the workforce we need to fill those jobs as we continue to create them. In a similar vein, consider a percent, for all capital projects, a report for a percentage of those to go to public art. Fort Worth has a great model of this that I think can be very beneficial for our community. I know that the subdivision ordinance is currently being updated. I received an update on that, and I would request, as conjunction in that point, a consideration of which goes along with our lead paint abatement work. Maybe consideration and adoption of the National Healthy Housing Codes in our code enforcement work, and something that and also the potential, something that I believe will be a non-starter on this, but implementing a rental registry within our community to ensure that all rental properties are up to code and are promoted for healthy housing standards. One that is a bit self-serving because I'm working on it, and hopefully I can do this at some point in the future, an update on the financial empowerment blueprint that is near completion, and the financial empowerment work, and our partnerships with CFE and others that are ongoing with our community, and how those promote and work towards our equity goals. The last one is something I thought about a couple years ago, and I think that our experience with the interaction of election laws created the issue that we had with the District 4 appointing, then running, and then having to run again. And that was part of what was in our charter. And our charter, I don't believe, has been reviewed or updated in quite a while. And I think there are some opportunities to really clean some things up and get that in a place that would be very beneficial for the community for the next several decades. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Kennard. Any other requests for future agenda items?
I want to formalize that we're going to have a presentation on the permitting process to short-term rentals and looking at improvements to be made there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah. Anyone else? All right, we'll now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the City Secretary at 5:16 p.m.
Mayor, we don't have any executive session items, and so we do not need to go into executive session unless council has any requests for attorney briefing on any item.
Does any council member need an attorney briefing on any of the items? All right, so we will then adjourn and we will reconvene for business session at 6 p.m. on a new Zoom meeting, correct?
Yes, sir. And we will send you a link shortly before the meeting, or now, actually.
Very good. We'll see you all at a little before 6. Thank you.